The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floors, its ceiling lost in artificial clouds that sparked with bioluminescent lightning. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated atmospheric pods, each breathing their preferred mix of gases, while discussing the most pressing issue the galaxy had faced in 3 millennia. The humans were laughing again. Ambassador Zekthara of the Vorthon Empire adjusted his breathing apparatus with one of his 6 arms, his compound eyes focusing on the human delegation across the vast chamber. The humans occupied a simple transparent dome filled with their primitive oxygen-nitrogen mixture, and inside that dome they were giggling like younglings who had discovered fermented fruit. "This is intolerable," hissed Representative Quindar from the Serpentine Collective, her forked tongue tasting the recycled air of her methane-rich environment. "We present them with the most serious diplomatic crisis in recorded history, and they respond with memes," completed Admiral Thexmore of the Crystalline Federation, his rocky features grinding together in what his species considered extreme agitation. "They called our formal declaration of territorial dispute a skill issue and projected moving images of something they call a crying cat onto the main display. The current crisis had begun 6 months ago when long-range sensors detected something unprecedented. A massive structure, clearly artificial, had appeared at the edge of the galaxy's outer rim. It was larger than most star systems, constructed from materials that defied conventional physics, and it was moving toward the galactic core with purposeful intent. The Galactic Council had mobilized every scientific mind, every military strategist, and every diplomatic expert across their member civilizations. They had run millions of simulations, drafted countless contingency plans, and prepared for what could be the greatest threat their peaceful galaxy had ever encountered. The humans had submitted a single-page response that consisted entirely of what they called reaction gifs, and a suggestion to just vibe with it, honestly. Ambassador Zekthara remembered when humanity had first joined the Galactic Council 800 years ago. They had been a young species, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel, with a disturbing tendency toward violence and an incomprehensible sense of humor. The Council had accepted them grudgingly, mainly because their homeworld possessed unique quantum crystalline deposits that were essential for advanced technology. Over the centuries, humanity had proven to be reliable allies, contributing innovations in medicine, engineering, and entertainment that had enriched galactic civilization. But they had also maintained their baffling cultural quirks, including their habit of finding humor in the most inappropriate situations. "Perhaps we should review the human response more carefully," suggested Counselor Vexani of the Peaceful Orchid Confederation, her petals rustling with uncertainty. "Their species has survived numerous extinction-level events on their home world. Maybe their apparent lack of concern indicates knowledge we don't possess." Admiral Thexmore's crystalline structure flashed red with indignation. "Knowledge? They submitted a formal military assessment that consisted of a single human making exaggerated facial expressions while music played. When pressed for details, they claimed this video meme contained all necessary strategic information. The artifact in question had been humanity's latest submission to the Crisis Committee. It showed a young human male with an unnaturally wide smile, pointing at various star charts while a repetitive musical phrase played in the background. The only text accompanying the submission read, "POV. You're a mysterious space structure, but humans exist." "They're not taking this seriously," Zekthara concluded, his voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of carefully maintained galactic peace. "In 48 hours, that structure will enter the outer colony's space. Our combined fleets are positioned for first contact, and humanity's contribution to our defense strategy is entertainment." The mysterious structure had defied every attempt at communication. It absorbed all directed energy, reflected scanning attempts, and continued its steady approach toward the galaxy's inhabited regions. Long-range observations suggested it was populated by beings of immense technological capability, possibly representing a civilization that predated the current galactic order by millions of years. Every species in the Council had contributed their finest warships, their most advanced weapons systems, and their greatest military minds to the defensive effort. Every species except humanity, which had sent 3 outdated cargo vessels and a crew that spent most of their time broadcasting something called sea shanties on open frequencies. "We should formally censure them," declared Representative Quindar, her serpentine form coiling with agitation. "Their frivolity in the face of potential extinction is an insult to every civilization that takes this threat seriously." The debate continued for hours, but Zekthara found his attention drifting to the human delegation. They seemed completely unperturbed by the heated discussions surrounding them. Ambassador Sarah Chen, humanity's chief representative, was actually knitting something while occasionally contributing unhelpful comments like, "That's rough, buddy," or "big if true" to the proceedings. As the session reached its climax, with various species demanding increasingly severe military responses to the approaching structure, Ambassador Chen finally stood up. The chamber fell silent, hoping that humanity would finally offer some useful contribution to their defense plans. "Listen," Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "I know you're all super stressed about our new space neighbors, but has anyone actually tried asking them what they want? Like maybe they're just tourists, maybe they're lost, maybe they've been traveling for so long they forgot to pack snacks and they're just looking for a good space diner." The silence that followed was deafening. "They haven't responded to any communications," Admiral Thexmore rumbled. "Well, duh," Chen replied, returning to her knitting. "You've been sending them formal diplomatic protocols and mathematical equations. Try memes. Everybody loves memes." Representative Quindar's hiss could be heard even through her atmospheric containment. "You suggest we communicate with a potentially hostile alien civilization using jokes?" "I suggest you try literally anything else," Chen said cheerfully, "because your current plan is to shoot first and ask questions later, which hasn't worked out super great for anyone in the history of ever." The session ended without resolution, but Zekthara noticed something troubling as he returned to his quarters. Despite their apparent flippancy, the humans had been monitoring the situation far more closely than they let on. Their seemingly random cargo ships were positioned at strategic points throughout the outer system, and their sea shanties weren't random at all. They were encoded with sophisticated mathematical sequences that human computers were broadcasting on multiple frequencies. That night, as Zekthara reviewed intelligence reports from the approaching structure, he discovered something that chilled his exoskeleton. The structure had begun altering course slightly, making minute adjustments that would bring it into direct alignment with the galaxy's most densely populated systems. It wasn't just passing through. It was targeting them, and somewhere in the depths of space, aboard their ridiculous cargo vessels, the humans were still laughing. The massive alien structure had reached the outer colonies, and first contact had not gone according to any of the Galactic Council's carefully prepared protocols. Captain Reina Vasquez floated in zero gravity aboard the human cargo vessel, definitely not suspicious, watching through the viewport as the most advanced military fleet in galactic history faced off against what the humans had started calling Big Chungus, much to the horror of their alien allies. The structure dwarfed even the largest Council dreadnoughts, its surface rippling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Morrison from his station, which was mostly held together with duct tape and what appeared to be chewing gum. "We're getting some wild readings from the artifact. It's scanning everything." "Everything how?" Vasquez asked, pulling herself toward the sensor console by grabbing a conveniently placed rubber duck that served as both decoration and navigation aid. "Everything. It's not just looking at our ships or our weapons. It's scanning our music, our art, our memes, our internet history. Holy shit, Captain. It just downloaded every episode of that show where people try to cook while blindfolded. The definitely not suspicious was one of 3 human vessels present for what was supposed to be the most important first contact in galactic history. While the Council had sent their newest battleships equipped with reality-warping weapons and shields that could deflect black holes, humanity had contributed cargo haulers that technically violated several safety regulations and crew members who had spent the journey here perfecting their fantasy football lineups. Any response to our messages? Vasquez asked, though she already knew the answer. The humans had been broadcasting everything from classical music to viral videos at the structure for hours, while the Council continued sending formal mathematical greetings and universal peace symbols. Still nothing official, Morrison replied, then paused. Wait, Captain, you need to see this. The main screen flickered to life, showing a transmission that was definitely not coming from any Council vessel. The image was grainy and distorted, but unmistakably showed the bridge of an alien ship. The beings visible were tall, ethereal creatures with too many joints and eyes that shifted color like oil on water. But they weren't speaking in the universal mathematical language the Council expected. They weren't even using standard galactic basic. They were speaking English, and they sounded frustrated. Tired of waiting for a proper response, one of the aliens was saying to another. We've been monitoring their communications for cycles, learning their languages, their cultures, their entertainment. Do you know how long it took us to understand the concept of ironic memes? The humans seem to be the only ones actually trying to communicate, replied another alien, whose voice carried harmonics that suggested mild amusement. The others keep sending mathematical sequences we mastered before their stars were born. Vasquez exchanged glances with her crew. Around them, emergency alerts were flashing as the Council fleet began charging weapons, interpreting the alien communication as some kind of threat analysis. Morrison, she said quietly, patch me through to Admiral Chen on the organized chaos. Within moments, Admiral Sarah Chen's weathered face appeared on their communication screen. Behind her, the Bridge of Humanity's flagship looked like a cross between a military command center and a college dormitory, complete with houseplants and a coffee machine that had been modified to also serve as a backup navigation computer. You seeing this, Reyna? Chen asked without preamble. Our new friends seem chatty. Also, they've apparently been binge-watching our cultural exports. Yeah, I caught that. Question is, do we tell the Council that these guys have been studying us specifically, or do we let them keep planning to shoot first and ask questions never? Before Vasquez could answer, another transmission burst across all frequencies. This time the image was clearer, and the alien speaking directly to the camera had obviously spent considerable time studying human body language and facial expressions. Greetings, humans, the being said, and there was something almost like a smile in its voice. We are the architects of the void, though we understand you have designated us with various names including Big Chungus, which we find endearingly ridiculous. Morrison choked on his coffee. The alien continued, We have traveled from the edge of reality itself, seeking a species that might understand the cosmic joke we discovered at the universe's end. Your species alone seems to possess the proper sense of humor for what we must discuss. On secondary screens throughout the human vessels, they could see the Council fleet's confusion as their translation systems struggled with concepts like cosmic joke and failed entirely to process endearingly ridiculous. We have observed your civilization for several rotations of your galaxy, the architect went on, and we are impressed by your species' ability to find humor in the face of existential dread. This is not a common trait among sentient life, and it is exactly what we require. Admiral Chen activated her fleet-wide communication system. All right, people. Looks like we're the only ones invited to this particular party. Morrison, did they just say they need our sense of humor? The alien transmission continued without pause. At the heat death of the universe, when all stars have burned out and all matter has decayed, there exists a final cosmic truth. We have discovered it, and we find ourselves in the awkward position of being the only beings in existence who think it's absolutely hilarious. "Captain," Lieutenant Morrison said weakly, "I think we broke first contact protocol." "What protocol?" Vasquez replied. "The Council's protocol was shoot anything that doesn't respond to math homework." The architect's image flickered for a moment, then stabilized. "The truth we have discovered is this. The universe's final state, after all possible entropy has been reached, forms a pattern that can only be described in your language as a cosmic rickroll." Dead silence filled the definitely not suspicious. "The fundamental structure of reality," the being continued with obvious delight, "ultimately resolves into what your species would recognize as an elaborate practical joke played by existence itself upon consciousness. We have been traveling for eons, seeking beings who might appreciate this revelation with us." Morrison slowly raised his hand. "Captain, should I be taking notes? Because I feel like this is the kind of thing we should write down." "We chose to approach your galaxy when we detected transmissions of something called memes," the architect explained. "These seem to indicate a species that could find humor in meaninglessness, joy in absurdity, and community in shared recognition of life's inherent ridiculousness." Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communication system. "Well, folks, looks like 3 billion years of evolution led to this moment. Aliens traveled across the universe to tell us a joke." The transmission shifted, and multiple architects became visible, all of them displaying what could only be described as eager anticipation. "We have prepared a presentation," they announced in unison. "It contains the fundamental truth of existence, presented in what we believe you call meme format. We hope you will find it, how do you say, poggers." Throughout the human fleet, laughter began to echo across communication channels. It started as chuckles, grew into giggles, and finally exploded into the kind of helpless laughter that comes from recognition of perfect absurdity. On the council frequencies, confused voices demanded explanations, tactical assessments, and immediate military responses to what they perceived as psychological warfare. But the humans understood perfectly. The universe's greatest mystery, the ultimate truth of existence, the final revelation that had driven an ancient species to cross the void itself, was a joke, and they had finally found someone to share it with. 3 hours after first contact, the Galactic Council was in complete chaos. Humanity was hosting the universe's first interdimensional comedy show, and Ambassador Zekthara was seriously considering early retirement. The Council's grand strategy room looked like a hurricane had hit a military museum. Star charts covered every surface. Holographic displays flickered with tactical readouts, and representatives from 46 species were arguing in 17 different languages while gesticulating wildly with appendages that ranged from tentacles to crystalline projections. "They've been broadcasting non-stop for 3 hours. Admiral Thexmore's rocky features were literally glowing red with frustration. "Our linguists can't keep up with the translation demands. They're using words that don't exist in any database." "That's because they're making them up," sighed Dr. Veltarin, the Council's chief xenolinguist, her blue-scaled head buried in her hands. "The humans and the architects are creating new language constructs in real time. Something called cosmic slang that apparently requires understanding of 14 different levels of irony to process correctly." Representative Quindar had stopped hissing entirely, which was either a very good sign or a very bad sign. Her serpentine form lay coiled around her speaking podium like she'd given up on existence itself. "They're calling it the Big Reveal, and they've invited every species in the galaxy to attend. Military Command wants us to treat this as a potential mind control operation." Zekthara activated his personal communication device and tuned into the human frequency, despite direct orders from council leadership to maintain communication silence. What he heard made his compound eyes cross. So then the heat death of the universe hits its final form, right? A human voice was saying with obvious excitement. And it turns out the entire cosmic microwave background radiation has been spelling out "never gonna give you up" in base 17 mathematics this whole time. The response came from one of the architects, and their voice carried harmonics that suggested they were laughing so hard they might collapse several dimensions. The best part is that consciousness itself persists just long enough to recognize the pattern before achieving final unity with the cosmic punchline. Oh man, that's brutal. Universe really said, "Got 'em," to literally everyone who ever existed. Indeed. Your species' concept of rickrolling appears to be a fundamental force of nature operating at quantum levels we had not previously detected. Zekthara turned off the communication feed and stared at his reflection in the polished surface of his desk. In 3,000 years of galactic peace, he had never encountered anything quite like this. The official position of the council was that humanity had somehow compromised themselves and possibly fallen under alien mind control. The evidence for this theory was that humans were acting exactly like humans, which council psychologists insisted was highly suspicious. A priority alert flashed on his terminal. The message was from Admiral Chen, transmitted on official diplomatic channels. "Hey, Zek," it began, which was already a violation of about 30 different protocols. "Just wanted to give you a heads up that we're about to resolve your whole cosmic crisis situation. Turns out these architect folks are basically the universe's comedy writers, and they've been looking for an audience for their material for literally millions of years. Super relatable, honestly." The message continued. "Anyway, they've got this whole presentation prepared about how existence is basically an elaborate setup for the ultimate joke, and they want to share it with everyone. Think of it like the universe's first stand-up special, except the comedian is reality itself, and the punchline is everything that ever was or will be. Should be fun. We're setting up a galaxy-wide broadcast in about 20 minutes. Feel free to tune in, but maybe warn your people that the fundamental nature of existence is apparently pretty funny, and some folks might not be ready for that level of cosmic humor. XOXO, Sarah." Zekthara stared at the message for a full minute before forwarding it to the entire council leadership with a note reading simply, "This is actually happening." 20 minutes later, every screen, every communication device, and every holographic display in the galaxy simultaneously activated with the same transmission. The image showed what appeared to be a hastily constructed stage floating in the vacuum of space between the human fleet and the architect vessel. A human in a formal tuxedo and a floating alien entity that looked like geometry having an existential crisis stood together at a podium that defied several laws of physics. "Ladies, gentlemen, and indeterminate cosmic entities," the human announced, "welcome to the End Times Comedy Hour, featuring your hosts, Dave Morrison from Earth and the architect of infinite jest from the void between thoughts. Greetings, biological and non-biological audiences," the architect added, their voice somehow conveying a perfect comedic timing. "We are here to share with you the ultimate truth that has kept us traveling across the cosmos for eons. Existence itself is the setup to the greatest joke ever told." Throughout the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence as Dave Morrison and an entity older than their local star cluster began what could only be described as the universe's first cosmic comedy routine. "So, the architects discovered that when the universe finally ends," Morrison explained, "when every star burns out and every atom decays, the final pattern of reality forms a message. You want to tell them what it says?" "With pleasure," the architect replied, projecting a holographic display of incomprehensible mathematical equations that somehow resolved into readable text. The final state of all existence, translated into your vernacular, reads, "Made you look. Thanks for playing. Please insert coin to continue." The silence that followed was so complete it could be measured in geological time periods. "The universe," the architect continued, clearly delighted, "is apparently a cosmic arcade game, and consciousness is the quarter you put into play. The heat death of everything is just the game over screen." "But wait, there's more," Morrison added with practiced enthusiasm. "Tell them about the respawn mechanic. Oh yes, after the heat death, quantum fluctuations eventually recreate identical universal conditions, meaning everything that has ever happened will happen again, exactly the same way, forever. You are all trapped in an infinite loop of cosmic repetition." Morrison grinned at the camera. "Which means somewhere out there, there's a version of you watching this show and thinking this can't be real. Spoiler alert, you're also thinking that." The architect's form shimmered, with what appeared to be barely contained mirth. "We have been searching for eons for a species that would not simply despair at this revelation, but would find it as hilariously absurd as we do. Humans, you have exceeded our expectations by immediately attempting to turn cosmic truth into entertainment content." "Speaking of which," Morrison said, "we've already got merchandising plans. T-shirts that say, 'I survived the ultimate cosmic joke, and all I got was infinite recursive existence.' The architects are setting up a gift shop in the next galaxy over." Throughout the Galactic Council chamber, representatives sat in stunned silence. Some had fainted. Others appeared to be having existential crises. Representative Quindar had actually tied herself in a knot. But slowly, gradually, a few beings began to laugh. It started with the younger representatives, those who had grown up consuming human entertainment. A giggle here, a chuckle there. Then the peaceful Orchid Confederation began rustling in what their species considered hilarious amusement. The Crystalline Federation started resonating at frequencies associated with their equivalent of belly laughs. "You see," the architect observed with obvious satisfaction, "humor is not merely a response to absurdity. It is the fundamental force that allows consciousness to persist in the face of meaninglessness. Your species has mastered this truth instinctively. Plus," Morrison added, "if you're going to be stuck in an infinite loop of existence, you might as well have fun with it. Life's too short to take seriously, and apparently it's also too infinite to take seriously, so really we're covered either way." Admiral Chen's voice cut through the broadcast from her flagship. "Ladies, gentlemen, and cosmic entities, the human fleet would like to formally invite everyone to the after-party. We've got snacks, drinks, and the architects have promised to show us home movies from the birth of the universe. Fair warning, apparently reality has always been this ridiculous. We just didn't notice." Ambassador Zekthera found himself laughing for the first time in decades. Around him, the council chamber was transforming from a crisis management center into something resembling a cosmic celebration. Even the most serious military advisors were beginning to crack smiles as the fundamental absurdity of their situation sank in. The universe was a joke, existence was a punchline, and somehow, against all odds, the humans had been ready for it. 3,000 years of peace were ending, but they were being replaced by something better. The first truly universal comedy club hosted by a species that had somehow evolved to find humor in absolutely everything. The architects had found their audience, humanity had found their calling, and the galaxy had discovered that sometimes the best response to cosmic horror was cosmic laughter. In the words of Dave Morrison, broadcasting to the entire known universe, "Thank you, we'll be here forever, literally, because physics is apparently run by comedians." And across the galaxy, for the first time in recorded history, every species laughed at the same joke together.